Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Kii. This ship is now available in the armory for coal. With update 14.2, you can get it for 135,000 coal. Similar to the Analt that was released or re-released, added to the armory for coal a little while ago. Seems like they're adding some of these older premiums in for coal. When was the last time we got a new premium ship directly available for coal? Seems like it's been a little while. Perhaps that's what they've decided to do with coal, is some of these less popular premiums, maybe they're just adding them back. Little unfortunate, the devaluing of coal. Seems like we're getting a lot of the new ships for steel or just straight up gambling events these days. Unlucky. Perhaps Wargaming will change over time, but it seems to be the direction they want to go. But let's talk about the Kii and whether or not it's worth getting for 135,000 coal. It's quite a bit cheaper than the other ships that are higher tier 9, tier 10s for coal. These tier 8s have a nice middle ground, as well as being really solid credit earners. Tier 8 premiums have always been a really good option for earning credits. Kii is no exception here. In fact, if you already had Kii before this, before the economic change, this was a while ago now, it had a special camo that gave you improved earning potential on your credits. Kii and Roma, I believe, had those options. That is now baked into the ship, but only if you had this ship and that camo previously. So if you're wondering, thinking about buying that extra camo, don't do it if you're just trying to get that extra credit earning potential. It's just a standard tier 8 premium as far as credit earning goes. But that doesn't make it a bad thing. Tier 8s do earn very, very nice credits. And assuming Matchmaker cooperates, which in this case it has, we're only facing tier 9s here, the ship is actually pretty solid, especially getting into closer range. These torpedoes are really, really useful compared to the Amagi that just does not have them. 10-kilometer range, 17,000 alpha damage. They certainly will be surprising people. They're not going to do a ton of damage consistently, but they're a very nice surprise to have in your back pocket. They are launched from the stern of your ship though, which makes them a little bit worse in a brawl. You got to go more broadside, more vulnerable if you're at close range compared to something like a torps, for example, tier 8 battleship with torpedoes. As for the main armament here, the real bread and butter of a ship like the Kii, it's very similar to Amagi. You have the same dispersion characteristics, but your sigma is a little bit worse. That value being the tendency for the shells to go towards the center of that dispersion ellipse. And you want a higher number. So 1.7 sigma here on Kii is not very good. You get 1.8 on Amagi, and to be honest with you, I really don't find Amagi all that consistent either. But you make up for that with 10 guns, which is really nice. Surprise torpedoes into the Kagero there. It's really convenient to have these torpedoes, man. The firing angles aren't amazing on them forward, I will say. You do have to give 40 degrees of broadside forward to fire them. But in a kiting position, 24 degrees is not too bad. Compared to Amagi, we actually also have better HP. You get a little bit more health, and I think the armor's a little bit different. Maybe a little better. We'll take a look at that in port afterwards. The belt armor might be just a little bit thicker here. But we're grounded flat broadside onto these guys. Fortunately, they are not pushing around the corner on us, at least for now. So maybe I can go out and deal with this North Carolina. We don't have the best range either as far as tier 8 battleships go. It's fine, certainly, 19.4 kilometers, but a lot of ships start to get 20 plus at this tier, and given how passive things are, yeah, that North Carolina is approaching the edge of our range. We have a 30-second reload on these main guns here, and a 45-second turret traverse, so not the best there. As far as the AP shells, they are not changed at all from the Amagi. They still have very good pen, as well as decent flight time. It's just the inconsistency with the dispersion you're going to have to worry about. And that's one of the reasons that I personally would not be looking to get the Kii, but I have the luxury of having some other tier 8 premium battleships that I would rather play. It's a solid pickup for someone looking to get a Japanese tier 8 battleship, but for me personally, given that I'm not a fan of Amagi, I really never have been. I'm a little biased there against this ship. I don't think I personally would be getting it, but for 135,000 coal, that's not too bad. It's a pretty nice middle ground. A little bit easier to grind that up if you're a newer player to get 135k coal versus around 200, 230, 250,000 coal sometimes for those higher tier 9, tier 10 premium ships. And now that we're brawling it out here a little bit, our Benson here comes in clutch with this smoke, helping us out. And unfortunately, I bump him from getting back in his smoke. So I apologize, Mr. Benson player. I did not mean to. My ship is not the most maneuverable thing in the world. Alsace here, at close range, you can actually cheek these ships. You notice I am just in front of his front turret, and we get the Citadel in on him. These guns have really good pen. It's just whether or not they hit is the idea here. At closer ranges, you might actually think about running a secondary build. I don't know if I should mention this too much because, well, the secondaries really aren't all that good, but I have seen people take it, so I decided to run a bit of a hybrid build in this one. That first game there I had for you was just more of a standard tank build, and the armor held surprisingly well. I was expecting to take a lot more damage in that push there, yet the armor did a pretty good job, even pushing in, where a ship like Kii, amagi, they're more kiting ships, right? More of your guns are towards the stern of your ship. It makes more sense, the design, to be a kiting ship, but the armor surprisingly held well for me. Not too bad. In fact, a little better than some of the German battleships maybe in the same positions, given that the German battleships have such gigantic superstructures. Kii has a superstructure, but it's not that big. Typically, you're not going to eat too many full pens from enemy battleship shells, where you might do when you're playing a German battleship pushing in. And 10-kilometer torpedoes, pretty nice. But the reason I really would not recommend running a secondary build here is gotta be your hitting DPM is not very good. If you just look at secondary DPM without taking into account its accuracy, you have 344,000 secondary DPM, putting you third best of all tier 8 battleships. Sounds great, right? But as soon as we take a look at hitting DPM, you drop to 10th best. And that really comes down to the inaccuracy of these main guns here. Your 100mm guns, which are gonna do the majority of your damage. I'll show you guys the secondary arc here is kind of bad to get all of your guns firing. But the main portion of your DPM has to be those 100mm Harugumo Akazuki style turrets. A little bit like Shikishima in that regard. But those have 600-meter dispersion at 10 kilometers, where the 140s get the improved 360-meter accuracy. And that's what we're looking for when it comes to really strong secondary ships here. Massachusetts, Zeton, those have that improved secondary accuracy, 360-meter dispersion, meaning you're going to get so many more of those secondaries actually hitting your target. And with Kii, I did not find it to be all that effective. Your main guns are really what you want to be using. So going for a more main gun build, or you could even run this hybrid build like I am here, you're going to get a little bit more consistent damage out of it. Although given that these Japanese battleships have some of the worst vertical dispersion, and that's really the key here when you're talking about broadside ships, you're going to be splicing or bracketing a lot of enemy ships in a ship like the Kii. It has the worst vertical dispersion of any tier 8 battleship. Amagi's right there with it, so it's not unique to this ship. So if you've already played Amagi, you know what you're getting into. But I did want to mention that your horizontal dispersion, though, is quite a lot better. You're among the best for horizontal dispersion, in between a more standard American battleship curve and the battle cruisers. So that's nice. If people are angled, the Japanese battleships can do rather well. You do have a decent amount of overmatch here against these same tier cruisers. We certainly overmatched through into, that York there earlier, and did some pretty good, or was it a Weimar? I was not actually paying attention. Whoops. One of those two ships. We overmatched through them, got a bit of a Citadel there at the end, but still, that is really what's so strong about these Japanese battleships. Once you get to Yamato at tier 10, obviously the 460mm guns overmatch a lot, and that's why it seems to do a little more consistent damage into those angled ships, where broadside ships, sometimes you can feel that vertical inaccuracy a lot of the time. Here we do manage to get that one Citadel, although no dev strike, unfortunately. But San Diego is a ship that is rather small and is not very thick either. It's a rather narrow ship, so those overpens are more likely to happen. We have to almost hit the water line or a little bit below the water line to actually get those shells to arm and actually citadel him there. So I was pretty happy, reasonably happy with one citadel, although of course we would prefer that dev strike. I should mention your AA is certainly much more powerful than amagi. Whether or not it's enough to actually deal with carriers, I'll let you decide. My opinion, of course, is that AA doesn't really matter that much in this game. Wargaming's designed it so that the carrier gets to do whatever they would like to. And this new AA rework, this new carrier rework, removing flak, is only going to exacerbate that problem, unfortunately. Now with a cyclone here, perhaps we get an opportunity to push in. I've been a little bit passive here to start, but now that the sub has been dealt with, we can start to push in here and hopefully get some of these caps back. The enemy team is well ahead on caps at the moment, although we do have a few more kills. So I'd like to go after this Gneisenau, maybe get in, although the Bismarck is probably going to die, as well as that Jean Bart. So we probably want to go after this Iowa and Gneisenau here. Now, Kii being a bit of an older ship also means we don't get any special consumables here. It's not like this ship has an improved spotter plane giving us accuracy like that new Bungo line does, or I guess that line's been in the game for a little while now. And you have no super heals here or faster cooldowns. It's a very standard feeling battleship. I guess the gimmick would have been the torpedoes back in the day, which were unique, certainly, but we all know how modern World of Warships is. It's a bit of a reskin an old ship with a bunch of gimmicks on them. Those experimental ships coming into the game this update. It's it's an interesting time to be playing World of Warships, man. The way Wargaming is developing this game. But that doesn't mean this ship is bad. Even though I'm not a huge fan of it, you can see it performs rather well here at times. Even that blind shot getting us a citadel, long-range citadels into that Iowa there. Although Iowa in itself is a bit of an older, more standard ship too. You can see how we're fighting against, well, more vanilla-style ships when we fight in some of these battles. Not too many of those new ships. They are very, very difficult to deal with. This ship's armor profile, again, I'll show you guys more specifics later. But it's 32 millimeters everywhere. There is no 51 millimeter deck armor or anything like that on this ship. So against HE, against a lot of these new secondaries, right, if you run into an Iparanga, you're going to get full pent everywhere. So while I think this ship is surprisingly decent in a brawl, you can see this hybrid build here giving us manual secondaries and about an 8.7 kilometer secondary range. It is quite useful at these closer ranges here. But I would not recommend full sending into a brawl unless you get the right matchmaker for it. Obviously, no carrier. You got to deal with the sub before you go in. But you got to be very careful what even surface ships are on the enemy team. Kii might be very good in ranked or brawl game modes, though. When there's less ships around, you can get closer. Your dispersion penalty, that 1.7 sigma, becomes a little bit less of a problem at that point, and you get to see the strength of the torpedoes coming into play and a little bit of the secondaries coming into play over something like the amagi. But for random battles, I gotta say I got pretty lucky with my matchmaker overall, so I didn't have too bad a time here. But if you get up tiered into those tier 10 games, tier 10 carriers, it gets rough. It gets really rough to play some of these older, lower tier ships into those kind of games. Here we managed to get ourselves Confederate, high caliber, a close quarters expert even. Nearly 5 kills. I haven't activated the Yamamoto Kraken in quite some time. Not quite to be in this one, but a really, really good game out of a hybrid build Kii. Maybe that's the recommended build I would actually give for you guys, considering that if you're just going to play a bit of a tank mid-range build, you probably just want to play Amagi instead, although that one doesn't give you the improved credit income. Only 11k damage from our secondaries in this one, here getting us over 500,000 credits there. Not bad. Not bad credit income here. These tier 8s are still solid options. If you don't know, the tier 10s typically aren't as good for earning credits because they have more of an income cost, their repair costs, but they also don't have the built-in credit multiplier. They're classified as special ships. You'll see a gold wreath surrounding a silver ship icon, where the full premiums are gold icon, gold wreath, and those have those improved credit multipliers baked into them. Tier 9 is the best, but tier 8s also have a good amount of credit income. And given it's a tier 8, I definitely recommend this over Anhalt, by the way. I guess I haven't actually talked about that quite yet, but there's not a lot of options available for tier 8 ships for coal, and coal being the most abundant resource, especially for newer players. This is a really good ship to get for a newer player looking for a battleship at higher tier, and they don't want to save up for some of those higher tier premiums. In fact, some of those higher tier battleships they have available might just be worse at their tier than a Kii. I'm looking at you, Palmer, GK, things like that. This is a pretty good option to go for, I gotta say. It's funny, as I'm recording this, I think I'm actually coming around to recommending Kii, at least for newer players. I was not expecting that, given that in my games I was rather frustrated by the dispersion, the inconsistency. Here I'm running full secondary, so we're having an interesting time here, getting all those overpens. I guess we hit every shell on the bagration, but yeah, not the damage we were looking for. Don't greed for your rear guns here, by the way. Very important to point out, I didn't greed to get all my guns off on the cruiser that was broadside. The Monty would have smashed us there. You have to keep this one angled. But I think I'm coming around on Kii as a new player recommendation for a higher tier battleship. You're so much cheaper than all of those other tier 9, tier 10 battleships when it comes to coal. And at its tier, Kii is pretty solid. You know, things like GK is 256,000 coal. If you're looking at some of the tier 9s, then Palmer 228,000 coal. It's nearly 100k coal more to save up. This is a good option. And at tier 8, you're still getting more credit income. Sharn 43, obviously another good pickup if you're looking for a mid-tier. But tier 8 gets a lot more credit income than the tier 7s. At least that's been my bit of a subjective take. I haven't looked into the numbers. That's just kind of a general feeling I have at a higher tier. But definitely a good ship to get if you're a newer player looking for a higher tier battleship to get for credit income. It is going to be inconsistent, though. It is going to have some of that amagi syndrome where you're not always going to get the best salvos out of it. Not quite able to finish off the Monty there even. But the secondary build, we're running the secondary build here. So I can't complain too much about the inaccuracy of the main guns if I'm not fully building for those main guns. Here, the secondaries with IFHE, we're getting some of those full pens. Not that that's necessarily the best build, but it does mean the smaller caliber, those Horigamo Akazuki style turrets, do actually full pen the Montana here in some areas. It gets over that 32mm threshold is the idea. Monty being a tier 10 battleship with only 406s, it's pretty low caliber these days for a tier 10. Not power creep at all, guys. Don't worry. Our armor holding rather well against him, assuming we keep it angled. Now Kaga, I'm assuming is accelerating here, and I'm gonna lead for that. And yet he's slowing down. I realized that a little bit too late. So these shells are gonna go a little too far forward. And again, secondary build, so we do hit a decent number of shells, but no citadel here, unfortunately. But 70 secondary hits. Not too amazing by secondary battleship standards, but it'll be interesting to see what the damage is from them here, since I was, again, running IFHE. That cuts our fire chance. We didn't get any fires from them, but hopefully that raw alpha damage is helping us out to get a little bit more value out of them. And it's only 16k still. Yeah, maybe not recommending a secondary build is wise. So some pretty solid games here out of the Kii. Despite its inconsistent guns, we actually performed rather well in it. Here is the armor, though. We do have to look at that. 32mm everywhere. So if you're against cruisers that can HE pen 32, or battleships that overmatch 32 in those up tiers, maybe you find yourself against a Musashi, a Yamato, anything like that, it's gonna hurt. It will hurt a lot. There's really not much you can do about it. As for your side armor here, we can see 292, and it's a bit of an odd citadel. It seems like it's above water, or at least waterline at the front of the ship, and then it slopes back here. So whether this is above water and slopes to waterline, or this is waterline and slopes below, I'm not exactly sure. It's kind of hard to tell. It almost looks like it starts waterline and then goes lower. Relatively minor there, but you're likely not going to take too many citadels, and that doesn't mean you should just go broadside, though. It's still going to eat a ton of full pens, and you can die rather quickly to that. But Keeping angled isn't too bad here, especially with these main guns. They have pretty good firing angles, and especially if you're in that kiting position, they do rather well. Really solid amount of hit points, especially with that new flag. Torpedoes, 10 kilometers, good damage, reasonable reload even on them, although you only get 3 per side. They're mostly for surprising people at those mid-ranges, but at close range, the YOLOs, it's really nice to have torps in those situations. Not that I ran into too many of those in this one. The speed, the rudder shift, turning radius, it's all decent, but it is an older battleship design. I guess we'll just say that. Here's the full secondary build that I was running. Would not recommend this unless you're running a brawl, maybe in ranked, you could try it out, but I would recommend you go with a more hybrid build where you, or at least hybrid, but maybe even just full tank build would be even better yet. Aiming systems for sure. We definitely, my main complaint is accuracy, right? So we definitely should be taking aiming systems mod 1, and we'll change the commander build too. If you're looking to go for a hybrid build, I would go maybe something like this. You can see how IFHE, I don't think helped us that much with the secondaries. And with the build like this, we get 8.7 kilometer secondary range. So a bit of a hybrid there, but notice we're missing out on concealment. That is the main downside here. You could even think about something like that if you're noticing your secondaries die a lot with this hybrid build. But if you want something that's a little more standard, you could definitely go something like this. Just full tank, very reasonable. Even the recommended build here, as we can see. If you want to greed a little bit, you could take super heavy AP shells, as I might do on this ship. And that gets us a little bit more AP alpha here, 13,500, a little over that even. Not too bad. There's just a few different ways you can build a ship like this one, but for random battles, I would definitely look towards, at most, a hybrid build, but probably you want to go tank concealment build. That way you can get down to a 14 kilometer detect, which is actually the worst detect out of any of these tier 8 battleships. They're all better than that. In the Armory Coal tab here, we can see there's not a lot of great options, to be honest with you. Not sure I'd recommend for random battles, GK or Palmer. Awami's okay. Not a fan of hybrids, personally. Marco Polo has some issues, as we looked at with the recent buff to its reload. Arnold's pretty bad. Yeah, it's an interesting time to be looking at all of these ships. It's not in here right now because this is actually my EU press account, so I'm recording this on Wednesday. It would be on NA. And actually, why don't I just show you? Yeah, making YouTube videos. I probably should have thought ahead. Here it is. NA, we can see it, 135k coal. It is quite a bit better deal than a lot of the other battleships available for coal. Right, like it's a nice middle ground here, like 228k coal for the tier 9s versus 135 for the tier 8s. That's a big drop off. Even going to tier 10, it doesn't go up that much from tier 9. There's a big jump there. Although, to be fair, you know, something like Sharon 43 reduced even further, and this is a very, very fun ship. If you're going for a fun ship, I think Sharon 43 is more fun than a Kii, personally. But Kii being higher tier probably earns you more credits overall. But that's going to do it for today on the Kii. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That way people thinking about getting this ship can check what other people think, their opinions on a ship like this one. Personally, I kind of talked myself into thinking it's a decent pickup for newer players who don't have a lot of premium ships, given that there's not a lot of good coal battleship options, especially for this price point for coal. When do you think we're going to get a new unique ship available for coal? It might be a while. Given the trends we're seeing from Wargaming, oh boy, we're getting a lot of copy-paste ships. Not a lot of new models these days, just old ones retooled with insane gimmicks. And, well, a lot of those new ones, even if they are a new model, which a lot of them aren't, as we've already mentioned, they typically go for steel or just are in loot boxes for gambling. Kind of disappointed in that. Wargaming, if anybody's listening at the end of this video, which I don't know, maybe consider changing course here, please. Anyways, I'm gonna go. Thank you very much for watching this video and have a great rest of your day.